Chapter 1. Part 1, Chapter 1 of Jurassic Park. Mike Bowman whistled cheerfully as he drove the Land Rover through the Cabo Blanco Biological Reserve on the west coast of Costa Rica. It was a beautiful morning in July, and the road before him was spectacular, hugging the edge of a cliff, overlooking the jungle and the blue Pacific. According to the guidebooks, Cabo Blanco was unspoiled wilderness, almost a paradise. Seeing it now made Bowman feel as if the vacation was back on track. Bowman, a 36-year-old real estate developer from Dallas, had come to Costa Rica with his wife and daughter for a 2-week holiday. The trip had actually been his wife's idea. For weeks, Ellen had filled his ear about the wonderful national parks of Costa Rica and how good it would be for Tina to see them. Then, when they arrived, it turned out Ellen had an appointment to see a plastic surgeon in San Jose. That was the first Mike Bowman had heard about the excellent and inexpensive plastic surgery available in Costa Rica, and all the luxurious private clinics in San Jose. Of course, they'd had a huge fight. Mike felt she'd lied to him, and she had, and he put his foot down about this plastic surgery business. Anyway, it was ridiculous. Ellen was only 30, and she was a beautiful woman. Hell, she'd been homecoming queen her senior year at Rice, and that was not even 10 years earlier. But Ellen tended to be insecure and worried, and it seemed as if in recent years she had mostly worried about losing her looks. That and everything else. The Land Rover bounced in a pothole, splashing mud. Seated beside him, Ellen said, "Mike, are you sure this is the right road? We haven't seen any other people for hours." "There was another car 15 minutes ago," he reminded her. "Remember, the blue one? Going the other way." "Darling, you wanted a deserted beach," he said, "and that's what you're going to get." Ellen shook her head doubtfully. "I hope you're right." "Yeah, Dad, I hope you're right," said Christina from the back seat. She was 8 years old. "Trust me, I'm right." He drove in silence a moment. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Look at that view. It's beautiful." "It's okay," Tina said. Ellen got out a compact and looked at herself in the mirror, pressing under her eyes. She sighed and put the compact away. The road began to descend, and Mike Bowman concentrated on driving. Suddenly, a small black shape flashed across the road, and Tina shrieked, "Look! Look!" Then it was gone into the jungle. "What was it?" Ellen asked. "A monkey?" "Maybe a squirrel monkey," Bowman said. "Can I count it?" Tina said, taking her pencil out. She was keeping a list of all the animals she had seen on her trip as a project for school. "I don't know," Mike said doubtfully. Tina consulted the pictures in the guidebook. "I don't think it was a squirrel monkey," she said. "I think it was just another howler." They had seen several howler monkeys already on their trip. "Hey," she said more brightly, "according to this book, the beaches of Cabo Blanco are frequented by a variety of wildlife, including howler and white-faced monkeys, three-toed sloths, and coatimundis. You think we'll see a three-toed sloth, Dad?" "I bet we do." "Really?" "Just look in the mirror." "Very funny, Dad." The road sloped downward through the jungle toward the ocean. Mike Bowman felt like a hero when they finally reached the beach, a 2-mile crescent of white sand, utterly deserted. He parked the Land Rover in the shade of the palm trees that fringed the beach and got out the box lunches. Ellen changed into her bathing suit, saying, "Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to get this weight off." "You look great, hon." Actually, he felt that she was too thin, but he had learned not to mention that. Tina was already running down the beach. "Don't forget you need your sunscreen," Ellen called. "Later," Tina shouted over her shoulder. "I'm going to see if there's a sloth." Ellen Bowman looked around at the beach and the trees. "You think she's all right?" "Honey, there's nobody here for miles," Mike said. "What about snakes?" "Oh, for God's sake," Mike Bowman said. "There's no snakes on a beach." "Well, there might be." "Honey," he said firmly, "snakes are cold-blooded. They're reptiles. They can't control their body temperature. It's 90 degrees on that sand. If a snake came out, it'd be cooked. Believe me, there's no snakes on the beach. He watched his daughter scampering down the beach, a dark spot on the white sand. Let her go. Let her have a good time. He put his arm around his wife's waist. Tina ran until she was exhausted, and then she threw herself down on the sand and gleefully rolled to the water's edge. The ocean was warm, and there was hardly any surf at all. She sat for a while, catching her breath, and then she looked back toward her parents and the car to see how far she had come. Her mother waved, beckoning her to return. Tina waved back cheerfully, pretending she didn't understand. Tina didn't want to put sunscreen on, and she didn't want to go back and hear her mother talk about losing weight. She wanted to stay right here, and maybe see a sloth. Tina had seen a sloth 2 days earlier at the zoo in San Jose. It looked like a Muppets character, and it seemed harmless. In any case, it couldn't move fast. She could easily outrun it. Now her mother was calling to her, and Tina decided to move out of the sun, back from the water, to the shade of the palm trees. In this part of the beach, the palm trees overhung a gnarled tangle of mangrove roots, which blocked any attempt to penetrate inland. Tina sat in the sand and kicked the dried mangrove leaves. She noticed many bird tracks in the sand. Costa Rica was famous for its birds. The guidebook said there were 3 times as many birds in Costa Rica as in all of America and Canada. In the sand, some of the 3-toed bird tracks were small, and so faint they could hardly be seen. Other tracks were large, and cut deeper into the sand. Tina was looking idly at the tracks when she heard a chirping, followed by a rustling in the mangrove thicket. Did sloths make a chirping sound? Tina didn't think so, but she wasn't sure. The chirping was probably some ocean bird. She waited quietly, not moving, hearing the rustling again, and finally she saw the source of the sounds. A few yards away, a lizard emerged from the mangrove roots and peered at her. Tina held her breath. A new animal for her list. The lizard stood up on its hind legs, balancing on its thick tail, and stared at her. Standing like that, it was almost a foot tall, dark green with brown stripes along its back. Its tiny front legs ended in little lizard fingers that wiggled in the air. The lizard cocked its head as it looked at her. Tina thought it was cute, sort of like a big salamander. She raised her hand and wiggled her fingers back. The lizard wasn't frightened. It came toward her, walking upright on its hind legs. It was hardly bigger than a chicken, and like a chicken, it bobbed its head as it walked. Tina thought it would make a wonderful pet. She noticed that the lizard left 3-toed tracks that looked exactly like bird tracks. The lizard came closer to Tina. She kept her body still, not wanting to frighten the little animal. She was amazed that it would come so close, but she remembered that this was a national park. All the animals in the park would know that they were protected. This lizard was probably tame. Maybe it even expected her to give it some food. Unfortunately, she didn't have any. Slowly, Tina extended her hand, palm open, to show she didn't have any food. The lizard paused, cocked its head, and chirped. "Sorry," Tina said. "I just don't have anything." And then, without warning, the lizard jumped up onto her outstretched hand. Tina could feel its little toes pinching the skin of her palm, and she felt the surprising weight of the animal's body pressing her arm down. And then the lizard scrambled up her arm toward her face. "I just wish I could see her," Ellen Bowman said, squinting in the sunlight. "That's all. Just see her." "I'm sure she's fine," Mike said, picking through the box lunch packed by the hotel. There was unappetizing grilled chicken and some kind of a meat-filled pastry. Not that Ellen would eat any of it. "You don't think she'd leave the beach," Ellen said. "No, hon, I don't." "I feel so isolated here," Ellen said. "I thought that's what you wanted," Mike Bowman said. "I did." "Well, then what's the problem?" "I just wish I could see her, is all," Ellen said. Then, from down the beach, carried by the wind, they heard their daughter's voice. She was screaming. Chapter 2, Punta Arenas. "I think she is quite comfortable now," Dr. Cruz said, lowering the plastic flap of the oxygen tent around Tina as she slept. Mike Bowman sat beside the bed, close to his daughter. Mike thought Dr. Cruz was probably pretty capable. He spoke excellent English, the result of training at medical centers in London and Baltimore. Dr. Cruz radiated competence, and the Clinica Santa Maria, the modern hospital in Punta Arenas, was spotless and efficient. But even so, Hello, J. Matty. It's near the end of the stream, but please stick around. Come, and I shall read you the story of Jurassic Park. Well, one more chapter anyway. Where was I? There. But even so, Mike Bowman felt nervous. There was no getting around the fact that his only daughter was desperately ill and they were far from home. When Mike had first reached Tina, she was screaming hysterically. Her whole left arm was bloody, covered with a profusion of small bites, each the size of a thumbprint. And there were flecks of sticky foam on her arms, like a foamy saliva. He carried her back down the beach. Almost immediately her arm began to redden and swell. Mike would not soon forget the frantic drive back to civilization, the four-wheel drive Land Rover slipping and sliding up the muddy track into the hills while his daughter screamed in fear and pain, and her arm grew more bloated and red. Long before they reached the park boundaries, the swelling had spread to her neck, and then Tina began to have trouble breathing. "She'll be all right now?" Ellen said, staring through the plastic oxygen tent. "I believe so," Dr. Cruz said. "I've given her another dose of steroids, and her breathing is much easier, and you can see the edema in her arm is greatly reduced." Mike Bowman said, "About those bites." "We have no identification yet," the doctor said. "I myself haven't seen bites like that before, but you'll notice they are disappearing. It's already quite difficult to make them out. Fortunately, I've taken photographs for reference, and I have washed her arm to collect some samples of the sticky saliva. One for analysis here, a second to send to the labs in San Jose, and the third will keep frozen in case it is needed. Do you have the picture she made?" "Yes," Mike Bowman said. He handed the doctor the sketch that Tina had drawn in response to questions from the admitting officials. "This is the animal that bit her?" Dr. Cruz said, looking at the picture. "Yes," Mike Bowman said. "She said it was a green lizard, the size of a chicken or a crow." "I don't know of such a lizard," the doctor said. "She's drawn it standing on its hind legs." "That's right," Mike Bowman said. "She said it walked on its hind legs." Dr. Cruz frowned. He stared at the picture a while longer. "I am not an expert. I've asked for Dr. Gutierrez to visit us here. He is a senior researcher at the Reserva Biologica de Carrara, which is across the bay. Perhaps he can identify the animal for us." "Isn't there someone from Cabo Blanco?" Bowman asked. "That's where she was bitten." "Unfortunately not," Dr. Cruz said. "Cabo Blanco has no permanent staff, and no researcher has worked there for some time. You are probably the first people to walk on that beach in several months. But I am sure you will find Dr. Gutierrez to be knowledgeable." Dr. Gutierrez turned out to be a bearded man wearing khaki shorts and shirt. The surprise was that he was American. He was introduced to the Bowmans, saying in a soft southern accent, "Mr. and Mrs. Bowman, how are you doing? Nice to meet you." And then explaining that he was a field biologist from Yale who had worked in Costa Rica for the last 5 years. Marty Gutierrez examined Tina thoroughly, lifting her arm gently, peering closely at each of the bites with a penlight, then measuring them with a small pocket ruler. After a while, Gutierrez stepped away, nodding to himself as if he had understood something. He then inspected the Polaroids and asked several questions about the saliva, which Cruz told him was still being tested in the lab. Finally, he turned to Mike Bowman and his wife, waiting tensely. "I think Tina's going to be fine. I just want to be clear about a few details," he said, making notes in a precise hand. "Your daughter says she was bitten by a green lizard, approximately 1 foot high, which walked upright onto the beach from the mangrove swamp." "That's right, yes." "And the lizard made some kind of a vocalization?" "Tina said it chirped or squeaked." "Like a mouse, would you say?" "Yes." "Well then," Dr. Gutierrez said, "I know this lizard." He explained that, of the 6,000 species of lizards in the world, no more than a dozen species walked upright. Of those species, only 4 were found in Latin America, and judging by the coloration, the lizard could be only one of the 4. "I'm sure this lizard was a Hold on a second. Basiliscus amoratus, a striped basilisk lizard found here in Costa Rica and also in Honduras. Standing on their hind legs, they are sometimes as tall as a foot. Are they poisonous? Oh, are they poisonous? No, Mrs. Bowman, not at all. Gutierrez explained that the swelling in Tina's arm was an allergic reaction. According to the literature, 14% of people are strongly allergic to reptiles, he said, and your daughter seems to be one of them. She was screaming. She said it was so painful. Probably it was, Gutierrez said. Reptile saliva contains serotonin, which causes tremendous pain. He turned to Cruz. Her blood pressure came down with antihistamines? Yes, Cruz said, promptly. Serotonin, Gutierrez said, no question. Still, Ellen Bowman remained uneasy. But why would a lizard bite her in the first place? Lizard bites are very common, Gutierrez said. Animal handlers in zoos get bitten all the time. And just the other day I heard that a lizard had bitten an infant in her crib in Amaloya, about 60 miles from where you were. So bites do occur. I'm not sure why your daughter had so many bites. What was she doing at the time? Nothing. She said she was sitting pretty still because she didn't want to frighten it away. Sitting pretty still, Gutierrez said, frowning. He shook his head. Well, I don't think we can say exactly what happened. Wild animals are unpredictable. And what about the foamy saliva on her arm? Ellen said. I keep thinking about rabies. No, Dr. Gutierrez said. A reptile can't carry rabies, Mrs. Bowman. Your daughter has suffered an allergic reaction to the bite of a basilisk lizard. Nothing more serious. Mike Bowman then showed Gutierrez the picture that Tina had drawn. Gutierrez nodded. I would accept this as a picture of a basilisk lizard, he said. A few details are wrong, of course. The neck is much too long, and she's drawn the hind legs with only 3 toes instead of 5. The tail is too thick and raised too high. But otherwise, this is a perfectly serviceable lizard of the kind we are talking about. But Tina specifically said the neck was long, Ellen Bowman insisted, and she said there were 3 toes on the foot. Tina's pretty observant, Mike Bowman said. I'm sure she is, Gutierrez said, smiling. But I still think your daughter was bitten by a common Bacillus gamaratus and had a severe herpetological reaction. Normal time course with medication is 12 hours. She should be just fine in the morning. In the modern laboratory in the basement of the Clinica Santa Maria, word was received that Dr. Gutierrez had identified the animal that had bitten the American child as a harmless basilisk lizard. Immediately, the analysis of the saliva was halted, even though a preliminary fractionation showed several extremely high molecular weight proteins of unknown biological activity. But the night technician was busy, and he placed the saliva samples on the holding shelf of the refrigerator. The next morning, the day clerk checked the holding shelf against the names of discharged patients. Seeing that Bowman Christina L. was scheduled for discharge that morning, the clerk threw out the saliva samples. At the last moment, he noticed that one sample had the red tag, which meant that it was to be forwarded to the university lab in San Jose. He retrieved the test tube from the wastebasket and sent it on its way. Go on, say thank you to Dr. Cruz, Ellen Bowman said, and pushed Tina forward. Thank you, Dr. Cruz, Tina said. I feel much better now. She reached up and shook the doctor's hand. Then she said, You have a different shirt. For a moment, Dr. Cruz looked perplexed. Then he smiled. That's right, Tina. When I work all night at the hospital, in the morning I change my shirt. But not your tie? No, just my shirt. Ellen Bowman said, Mike told you she's observant. She certainly is. Dr. Cruz smiled and shook the little girl's hand gravely. Enjoy the rest of your holiday in Costa Rica, Tina. I will. The Bowman family had started to leave when Dr. Cruz said, Oh, Tina, do you remember the lizard that bit you? Uh-huh. You remember its feet? Uh-huh. Did it have any toes? Yes. How many toes did it have? 3, she said. How do you know that? Because I looked, she said. Anyway, all the birds on the beach made marks in the sand with 3 toes, like this. She held up her hand, middle 3 fingers spread wide. And the lizard made those kind of marks in the sand, too. The lizard made marks like a bird. Uh-huh, Tina said. He walked like a bird, too. He jerked his head like this, up and down. She took a few steps, bobbing her head. After the Bowmans had departed, Dr. Cruz decided to report this conversation to Gutierrez at the biological station. "I must admit the girl's story is puzzling," Gutierrez said. "I have been doing some checking myself. I'm no longer certain she was bitten by a basilisk. Not certain at all." "Then what could it be?" "Well," Gutierrez said, "let's not speculate prematurely. By the way, have you heard of any other lizard bites at the hospital?" "No? Why?" "Let me know, my friend, if you do." Alright. So that's the first 2 chapters of Jurassic Park. It's a very slow start compared to the movie, which is just like, hey, look, dinosaurs, immediately. But that is